Let's now discuss Snowden now with John Laughland. He is the Director of Studies at the Institute of Democracy and Cooperation. Mr. Laughland, welcome to RT. So President Putin said that Snowden will leave Russia when opportunity presents itself. But how is it possible technically? But is it realistic considering that the US showed they're willing to ground any plane, actually, to get the man?
It is realistic, yes, because once his legal status becomes clear in Russia, then he can process his application for asylum or permanent residence in Venezuela or in another Latin American country. As we know, those countries, Venezuela certainly have offered him asylum, and his problem in Moscow in the transit lounge was simply that he couldn't avail himself of that offer because he was stuck in a legal limbo. And so his goal in applying for this temporary asylum in Russia is simply to get himself out of legal limbo and, of course, out of the airport.
And as we remember, one of Russia's conditions for Snowden's asylum was no more leaks harming and damaging to the US. But he's already actually handed key documents to other journalists. Does that mean that those journalists can't release this information too?
No, I mean, I think he is in an impossible situation. He doesn't want to cease his activity. He wants to carry on campaigning. Vladimir Putin recognized that in his very first remark about the case some weeks ago when he said that he didn't think it was likely that Snowden would agree to stay in Russia because of the condition which Putin was going to impose. But it's clear now that the solution has been that he will agree to forbear, at least that's what we understand, he will agree to forbear releasing any more information for as long as he is on Russian territory. The Russians, as your reporter just said, did not seek this outcome. They didn't intend Snowden to come to Russia. He happened to be transiting through Moscow just as many people transit through a country without ever intending to stay there. And so I understand this quite simply as a technical means by which he can, as I say, get out of legal limbo and make progress on his application for permanent residence, that's to say for asylum, in Latin America.
Do you think Snowden's revelations have had an impact, or are people more concerned about where he'll end up and the political situation around his asylum?
No, I think they've had an impact. I mean, they haven't had an impact, as far as we can tell yet, on, for example, transatlantic relations. In an earlier interview with you, I pointed out that the European Union governments are hand in glove with the Americans on spying. They share intelligence. They spy on their own citizens in the same way. And so their expressions of outrage are, in my view, fake. But of course, it's had a huge effect in, international public opinion as a whole. People now know that there is this massive espionage program, that their emails and so on are being spied on, all this in the name of the war against terrorism. And for as long as he remains in the headlines, I think that people will continue, or at least some people will continue, to remember that message.
Yeah, and also there's been a promise of even more revelations should anything happen to Snowden. But from your point of view, what more could he possibly release?
I obviously don't know. I mean, we assume that he has released the bulk of his information already, and having, of course, left his earlier job, he now no longer has access to the same kind of information that he may have had before. I mean, I'm not privy to him. I have no idea what he may or may not have, but I don't see that he had any interest in keeping information behind. I mean, he's given the most important information already, and that's why I think, frankly, it was not all that difficult for him to give this agreement that he seems to have given to the Russian authorities.
All right. John Laughland from Institute of Democracy and Cooperation, thank you very much indeed for your time.